You're listening to the Fresh Hell podcast. Fresh Hell contains stories of a disturbing and often graphic nature and is intended for a mature audience. Please don't let your kids listen to this, or they might turn out like us.
I'm Annie from the US.
And I'm Johanna from Austria, and you're listening to your favorite international podcast. The podcast hosted by two women who never met in real life, but who have somehow made that work better than most in-person relationships.
That really is true. Before we start, we want to give a huge thank you to all of our patrons. You help this show keep going, and we really can't tell you how much we appreciate your support. It's so much more than you know, truly. I know we talk about death a lot, but you're giving us life. Oh my God, that's so cheesy. But no, really, sincerely though, we could not still be doing this at all if it weren't for all of you. So thank you. If you would like to join our Patreon with monthly support, you get early access to episodes, exclusive bonus content, and just this slightly smug feeling of being part of our very small but strange corner of the internet. You are actively funding independent podcasting, or think of it as just paying for ghost research, one weird episode at a time.
Exactly.
But we do really, really appreciate it so very much. Yeah. Thank you also to those who have donated one-time donations at PayPal. We appreciate that equally. Really, thank you. And now it's time to jump into today's episode.
Yes, because last week we gave you the Fresh Hell Guide to Being Dead, our unofficial, non-theologically certified tour through what different cultures and religions think happens after you die. Heaven, hell, reincarnation, ghost shows, paperwork, yada, yada, yada. We told you all about that.
Some fascinating stuff, really.
It was.
Yeah.
It was. But this week we're not talking about the dead. We're talking about the ones who were almost dead. Because thousands of people claim they've died or come very, very close, and then came back with stories about tunnels, about lights, about music, about voices, entire out-of-body observations that sound incredibly detailed and incredibly familiar. And that's what makes it so fascinating. These reports come from people all over the world, different languages, different cultures, different religions, or no religion at all. And yet the experiences often share same or very similar features. So what are we supposed to do with that? Are these just memories or dreams? Is it your dying brain trying to comfort you? Or are they glimpses into something we're not supposed to see yet?
I mean, spoiler alert, no one knows. We don't know. But we're going to see how far we can get in uncovering some of the mystery, at least. Starting with, what even is a near-death experience? The short answer is, it is what some people report after coming very close to death, or even being briefly clinically dead, no heartbeat, no brain activity, nothing. Then, somehow, they're resuscitated and they come back with stories. Some remember floating above their bodies. Some describe going through a tunnel toward a bright light. Some meet deceased loved ones, religious figures, or beings they describe as being made of love and light. Others say they experienced a full life review, like watching every moment of your life projected back at you, including how your actions made other people feel, which sounds intense, right?
Mm.
I'll also warn you before we get too deep, this episode is a little bit sad. It can be a little bit sad if you're grieving somebody. It might.
Yeah.
It's nothing terrible, but if you're an ugly crier, or wearing a certain kind of eye makeup or something today, or have a presentation like right after you listen to this, maybe wait. That's all. So the term near-death experience was popularized in 1975 by Dr. Raymond Moody. Great name for a psychiatrist. He published the book A Life After Life. He studied over 100 cases where people were clinically dead or very close and came back with vivid accounts. I don't think that he really wanted to prove anything, but the patterns were hard to ignore. Moody identified several common features, including an overwhelming sense of peace, separation from the physical body, traveling through a tunnel, encountering light or beings, a barrier or point of no return, and then being told somehow in different ways that it is not your time. Now, of course, we also need to say that not every near-death experience includes all or any of these, but they show up enough to be considered the quote-unquote classic experience. Another major figure in this field is Kenneth Ring, a psychologist who co-founded the International Association for Near-Death Studies, or IANDS? IANDS. I keep wanting to say LANDS, but that's not, or IANDS. IANDS, yeah. So IANDS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. It is still active today. In the early 1980s, Ring published Life at Death, where he analyzed hundreds of near-death experience cases, and he identified a sort of 5-stage pattern. These are peace, separation from the body, entering darkness or a tunnel, seeing light or spiritual beings, and returning to the body. He also did important work on the after effects of near-death experiences and how people were changed afterward. Many reported becoming more spiritual, less afraid of death, more compassionate, and more interested in helping others. Some changed careers. Some lost interest in material things altogether. So once researchers like Raymond Moody and Kenneth Ring brought near-death experiences into public awareness, the next big question became, how do we actually study this? Because you can't exactly put a, quote, saw a tunnel of light on an EEG. And anecdotal stories, however compelling, just are not the same as data. Although, if you have them, we would like to hear them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Enter Dr. Bruce Greyson, a psychiatrist who basically became the go-to authority for clinical NDE research in the early 1980s. Greyson developed a standardized questionnaire, now known as the Greyson Near-Death Experience Scale. I'm sorry, but is that not a great metal band name?
It's true. But it's kind of a crossover between metal and
Enya.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe.
It's like death metal meets Enya.
Something Irish, definitely.
Oh, I mean, why not? The Greyson Near-Death Experience Scale. So, okay, let's talk about this scale, though, because this is a scale it's sort of a list of 16 questions, and it is designed to measure the depth and intensity of your near-death experience based on recurring features reported across hundreds of cases. Things like, did time seem to speed up or slow down? Did you feel separated from your body? Did you pass into or through a tunnel? Did you encounter a being of light? Did you experience a review of your past? Each question is scored from 0 to 2 with a maximum score of 32. A score of 7 or higher qualifies as a true near-death experience under the system. And over the years, this has helped reveal some interesting patterns. For example, people who were religious and people who were not at all religious often reported the same kinds of experiences. Children, too young to have absorbed any afterlife narratives, will still talk about tunnels, lights, and being told it is not their time. And the most intense near-death experiences, they often happen during periods when the brain should have been completely offline. So, thanks to Greyson, near-death experiences became measurable, at least to a point.
One thing that is important to mention, this isn't tied to any one belief system. Atheists, Christians, Buddhists, children, surgeons, truck drivers, people from literally every background have reported eerily similar experiences. And as you said before, Annie, some say it changed their lives, and others find it just too hard and too strange to even talk about. And this is where the line gets so blurry, because near-death experiences aren't just spiritual stories. They are also a scientific medical phenomenon. They have been recorded during cardiac arrest, anesthesia awareness, and even in situations where the brain should not have been functioning at all. Some of the most vivid accounts come from people who've had zero measurable brain activity at the time, which, medically speaking, should make it impossible to experience anything. So what are NDEs? Well, that's the mystery, and depending on who you ask, you'll get very different answers. But let's rewind a little bit, because while all of this exploded in the 1970s, near-death experiences go back much, much further than that, because accounts of people who seemed to die, traveled somewhere else, and then came back with stories can be found in the earliest written records we have. In pharaonic Egypt, for example, the Book of the Dead reads like a spiritual travel guide for the deceased. We talked about it last week a little bit. It's full of vivid imagery and tunnels and judges and trials and, the feather and the crocodile, hippopotamus, whatever it was. It's kind of a cosmic navigation tip to help the soul reach the field of reeds. And it's meant for the actually dead, but some of the descriptions, like separating from the body, encountering divine beings, reviewing one's deeds, this all sounds remarkable like what modern NDEs describe. Similar motives show up in Mesopotamian texts where the afterlife journey is murky, shadowy, often filled with gates, guardians. And then we have India. Descriptions of soul travel and otherworldly visions can be found in very old scriptures. In pre-Buddhist China, there are tales of the dead returning with messages for the living. A spiritual detour that feels much like it just wasn't your time yet. And then in pre-Columbian Mesoamerica, death wasn't a singular end, but a series of transitions, sometimes with a very dramatic round trip between the worlds. So you see the language is very different and the cosmology wildly varies, but the structure of the experience, the separation, the journey, the revelation, the return, it has been the same in so many cultures for millennia.
One of the earliest written examples that clearly resembles a modern near-death experience comes from Plato in the Republic. He describes the story of a soldier who was killed in battle. After 12 days, just as his body was about to be cremated, he woke up and recounted his journey through the afterlife. He saw other souls being judged. Some went up, some went down. He was told to go back to Earth and report what he had seen. Then there's Plutarch, writing a few centuries later, who tells the story of Thespius, a man who falls from a height, is declared dead, and spends 3 days journeying through the afterlife before suddenly reviving. His experience includes an out-of-body view, a passage through the darkness, meeting spiritual guides, and receiving moral instruction before being sent back. Sound familiar? Much later, and on another continent, we found historical records of Chippewa warriors who reported near-death experiences during battle or illness. They spoke of leaving their bodies, traveling to other realms, meeting spirit beings, and then being told to return. These weren't considered hallucinations or dreams. They were treated as important spiritual experiences worth retelling and interpreting.
Okay, so let's fast forward to the 18th century, because along comes Pierre Chaudy-Monchot, a French military physician with a curious mind and apparently a very decent grasp of what we now call resuscitation science. In 1740, Monchot published a case report describing a man, a pharmacist in Paris, who had nearly drowned. He lost consciousness, was presumed dead, but was eventually revived. And when he came to, he reported vivid visions and sensations from the time he was gone. He spoke of a light so bright and so warm and so comforting that he was sure he had seen heaven. And all of this in itself wasn't unheard of, but what was new was how Monchot interpreted it. He didn't claim divine intervention, he didn't call it a soul journey, but instead he proposed that the experience was caused by a vapor of the blood, quote unquote. And this vapor of the blood was rising to the brain, kind of a biological hallucination triggered by the near-death state. That might sound a little bit weird now, like, Enlightenment era way of saying maybe his brain just freaked out. But at the time, it was a big deal because Monchamp wasn't dismissing the experience as nonsense. He was suggesting it was real, but physiological, a thing that happens when the body is shutting down. And that idea, the idea that near-death experiences might have a mechanism, a biological reason behind them, opened the door for everything that followed. What's interesting to mention is that in recent days, scientists have tested the NDE described by Monchamp with the Greyson near-death experience scale. That's a mouthful.
I know.
And even though we don't have a lot of detail of that near-death experience, it's just like a short text, it scored a 12, so higher than the 7 that is required to label it a real near-death experience. Okay, so now we have 2 tracks. We have one is the cultural or spiritual one, and the other one is the medical, the scientific one. And since the days of Monchamp and his vapor theories, scientists now have been trying to figure out just what people are experiencing during near-death events. Is it spiritual? Is it chemical? Is it your brain staging a light show while the lights go out?
Who can say? I keep thinking is it chemical? Yeah. Seriously though, nobody knows for sure, but there are a few leading theories. And while none of them explain everything, each one offers a piece of the puzzle. 1. Hypoxia, meaning not enough oxygen. This is probably the most widely accepted explanation. When the brain is deprived of oxygen, like during cardiac arrest, it can start firing erratically. Some researchers believe this causes the tunnel vision effect, the bright lights, even hallucinations of people or sounds. Basically, your brain is suffocating and it's going out in a blaze of neural chaos. The problem is, some near-death experiences happen when oxygen levels are still normal, and the patterns in those reports often look the same as the ones from hypoxic patients, so this reason doesn't fully line up. The second possibility is DMT release. Some scientists suggest that the body releases just a surge of DMT, a naturally occurring psychedelic compound, during extreme stress or death. DMT trips, especially when taken in clinical studies, often include tunnels, beings made of light, and a sense of cosmic unity, which might sound familiar. But the research here is still very limited. We don't actually know whether the human brain does release DMT at death. This theory is seemingly more based on vibes than it is on hard data.
So basically the theory is your brain loves you and wants to make everything as comfortable as possible for you while you're dying.
I mean, yeah, that seems like
That's a common theme though in all the theories, right?
Yeah, kind of.
Because it could also be said for yet another theory that focuses on the temporal lobe, the part of the brain involved in memory, language, and sensory input. Electrical stimulation of this region has been shown to trigger intense spiritual sensation. Again, presence of beings, feelings of awe, and out-of-body experiences. So this theory goes, during trauma, the temporal lobe might misfire and create an experience that feels completely real, but is actually internally generated. But again, this also doesn't explain everything, especially when people report accurate details about what was happening in the room or, on the roof while they were supposedly unconscious. And don't worry, we're getting to these stories. Some researchers think that NDEs are a type of REM sleep intrusion where dreamlike states break into waking consciousness. Think, and I talked about that a lot because I'm a sufferer, sleep paralysis, but in a medical way. You feel frozen, you hear voices, you experience visions, your brain is dreaming, but your body is still there, is still awake. This could potentially explain the floating, the voices, and maybe even the live reviews. But once again, it struggles to explain when it happens, like when your heart has stopped and there is no more measurable brain function. Like, how can you, how is your body still awake?
I do know. Yeah. Others argue that what we call near-death experiences are just botched anesthesia. You're not actually unconscious, just paralyzed and unable to speak, while your brain picks up fragments of conversation and turns them into a narrative.
And again, this is so similar to what is happening during sleep paralysis.
Exactly. And honestly, it sounds horrifying. And yes, it happens. But here's the thing. Most near-death experiences do not match the emotional tone of anesthesia awareness. People who have been through both of these things have said that they are distinct and not the same thing, which makes sense.
Can you imagine going through both of these things? Like, what are the odds?
Well, I'm guessing that one was related to the other. If you've had near-death experience, then you've probably also had a situation in a hospital surgery. Not everybody, obviously, but I would think that there would be a certain Venn diagram of people who have repeated hospital procedures due to illness of some sort and near-death experiences. And anesthesia awareness. The more often you're put under, the more likely the chances that you might be. That's all I mean. Does that make sense? Frequent flyers. Then, of course, we have cultural expectations. It's the idea that near-death experiences are shaped by our cultural and personal expectations. Basically, you see what you're expecting to see. So Christians will see Jesus. Hindus will see Yama. Atheists are floating around up there meeting a being that says you're not done yet. Basically, your brain will construct a comforting narrative using symbols that you've been marinating in your whole life. But, and this is a big but, some of the most consistent NDE reports, some of the most consistent near-death experience reports, they come from young children or people who don't actually believe in anything, but still saw similar things, which makes this theory feel more like a partial explanation than a full one. Because, sure, maybe it's chemicals or oxygen or a misfiring temporal lobe. Maybe it's your brain's final fireworks show before the curtain falls. But then, how do you explain Pam Reynolds? If you've ever gone down the rabbit hole of near-death experience research, you've probably heard about Pam Reynolds, and if not, here's why her story has been keeping neurologists and philosophers up at night since the 1990s. In 1991, Pam underwent a rare and extremely high-risk procedure called hypothermic cardiac arrest. Basically, her body was cooled down to around 60 degrees Fahrenheit, her heartbeat and brain waves were completely flatlined, and the blood was drained from her head. Also, surgeons could remove a large aneurysm from her brainstem. There was no normal brain activity, no measurable consciousness. Her eyes were taped shut, and earplugs playing clicks were placed in her ears to monitor brainstem responses. Nothing. No response. Clinically, she was as close to dead as a person can get, while still technically alive on the table. And yet, after she was revived, Pam reported a vivid experience. She said she floated above her body and watched the surgical team working. She described the tools that they used, including the unusual-looking bone saw, which she said looked like an electric toothbrush. She recalled hearing a female voice say they were, quote, having trouble with the artery, even though she'd had those earphones on playing that clicking noise. Here are some excerpts of Pam's recollections of what she experienced. Quote, I remember seeing several things in the operating room when I was looking down. It was the most aware that I think I have ever been in my entire life. The saw thing, it looked like an electric toothbrush, and it had a dent in it, a groove at the top where the saw appeared to go into the handle, but it didn't. And the saw had interchangeable blades too, but these blades were in what looked like a socket wrench case. Someone said something about my veins and arteries being very small. End quote. So then they had the heart and lung machine, which was turned off, and all of the blood was drained from her body. She continues, quote, "There was a sensation like being pulled, but not against your will. I was going on my own accord because I wanted to go. I have different metaphors to try to explain this. It was like the Wizard of Oz being taken up in a tornado vortex, only you're not spinning around like you've got vertigo. You're very focused, and you have a place to go. The feeling was like going up in an elevator real fast, and there was sensation, but it wasn't a bodily physical sensation. It was like a tunnel, but it wasn't a tunnel. At some point very early in the tunnel vortex, I became aware of my grandmother calling me, but I didn't hear her call me with my ears. It was a clearer hearing than with my ears. I trust that sense more than I trust my own ears. The feeling was that she wanted me to come to her, so I continued with no fear down the shaft. It's a dark shaft that I went through, and at the very end there was this very little tiny pinpoint of light that kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I noticed that as I began to discern different figures in the light, and they were all covered with light, they were light and had light permeating all around them, they began to form shapes that I could recognize and understand. I could see that one of them was my grandmother. I don't know if it was reality or projection, but I would know my grandmother, the sound of her anytime, anywhere. Everyone I saw looking back on it fit perfectly into my understanding of what that person looked like at their best during their lives. I recognized a lot of people. My Uncle Gene was there, so was my great-great-aunt Maggie, who really was a cousin. On Papa's side of the family, my grandfather was there. They were specifically taking care of me, looking after me. They would not permit me to go further. It was communicated to me, that's the best way I know how to say it, because they didn't speak like I'm speaking, that if I went all the way into the light, something would happen to me physically. They would be unable to put this me back into the body me, like I had gone too far and they couldn't reconnect. Then they were feeding me. They were not doing this through my mouth like with food, but they were nourishing me with something. The only way I know how to put it is something sparkly. Sparkles is the image I get. My grandmother didn't take me back through the tunnel or even send me back or ask me to go. She just looked up at me. I expected to go with her, but it was communicated to me that she just didn't think she would do that. My uncle said he would do it. He's the one who took me back through the end of the tunnel. Everything was fine. I did want to go. But then I got to the end of it and I saw the thing, my body. I didn't want to get into it. It looked terrible, like a train wreck. It looked like what it was, dead. I believe it was covered. It scared me and I didn't want to look at it. It was communicated to me that it was like jumping into a swimming pool. No problem. Just jump right into the swimming pool. I didn't want to, but I guess I was late or something because the uncle pushed me. I felt a definite repelling and at the same time a pulling from the body. The body was pulling and the tunnel was pushing. It was like diving into a pool of ice water. It hurt. End quote.
Did you get goosebumps?
Yeah, for sure.
So skeptics argue that Pam might have perceived parts of the experience before she was fully under, or after she was starting to come back, that her brain, though suppressed, might still have been active in ways we can't yet detect. That her descriptions could have been based on what she heard subconsciously or even what she later pieced together from conversations and what she heard from the medical staff. And yes, some of her details were later found to be not entirely accurate. The bones so didn't exactly match what she described. Some parts may have been embellished or reconstructed after the fact. Brains are weird that way. But even skeptics admit that some aspects of her account are hard to explain. Especially the timing, especially the fact that she had no measurable brain activity when some of these perceptions would have had to occur, at least if we assume consciousness is strictly a brain thing. So we're left with two possibilities. Either Pam Reynolds had a profound spiritual experience that momentarily transcended biology, or her brain, in a state no one fully understands yet, produced a vivid internal narrative under extreme duress. And honestly, depending on your worldview, both of these options are equally mind-blowing. And of course, there are so many other cases, and we have some of the classics here for you today. The first one took place in Seattle in 1984, and it's the story that is known of Maria's shoe. Maria was a migrant worker who had a heart attack and was rushed to the hospital. She was revived after flatlining and later told her social worker something very strange. She said that while she was unconscious, she floated out of her body through the hospital walls, up, and saw a tennis shoe on the third-story ledge. She was able to describe the tennis shoe. It was a dark blue one, worn with a scuffed toe and a broken lace tucked under the heel. The social worker, understandably very skeptical, she went looking. And there it was, exactly as Maria described, on a window ledge where she couldn't possibly have seen it. From inside, you couldn't see the scuffed toe. From outside, you couldn't get up there without equipment. Did she guess it? Did someone plant it? Is this an urban legend? I honestly don't know, but to this day, apparently this case is cited in medical and nursing literature as one of the more baffling examples of apparent veridical perception. Seeing something so real from outside the body while clinically unconscious.
It is interesting, isn't it? Like, there doesn't seem...
It is so interesting.
Yeah, you can't think of an immediate reason why somebody would fake that. Like, there's just no point.
Why? What for?
Exactly. Yeah. Like, what's the point? Why would you even bother with the effort? So then in the 1990s, Kenneth Ring conducted a study on near-death experiences in the blind. 31 people in total, 14 of whom were blind from birth. If near-death experiences are hallucinations, then surely they'd see nothing, right? That's not what happened. Many of them reported visual experiences, describing faces, colors, light, tunnels, surgeries, even floating above their own bodies and seeing things they'd never seen before. One of the people they interviewed was Vicki. Vicki was born prematurely in the 1950s and lost her sight due to optic nerve damage caused by excess oxygen in her incubator. You don't hear about too much oxygen damaging things very often, do you? She had never experienced light, shadow, or any visual input. She didn't even understand the concept of light. At age 22, she was in a severe car crash and experienced a vivid near-death experience. During it, she found herself floating above her body in the hospital, where she saw doctors working on her and overheard their conversation about possible hearing loss. She recognized her own body by her wedding ring and general shape, something she'd never seen before. She then described ascending through the hospital roof and into a tunnel accompanied by music that turned into hymns. She emerged in a place of radiant light and love where the grass, trees, and people all seemed to be made of light. She saw deceased friends and family members, including childhood friends who had been blind and mentally disabled in life, but who appeared whole, vibrant, and healthy in the afterlife. She also encountered a being she identified as Jesus, who told her she could not stay. Vicki was devastated, but was told she needed to return to learn love, to forgive, and to have children, which she desperately wanted. She would then go on to have 3. Before she returned, she was shown a panoramic life review with guidance on the meaning and consequences of her actions. She was then abruptly pulled back into her body, like a roller coaster in reverse. What makes Vicki's account so remarkable is that despite being blind since birth, she gave visual descriptions of her surroundings, people, and events, down to details like the clothing and physical space around her. Another woman described the instruments the doctors were using and what the nurses were wearing. Another described seeing herself for the first time and then crying because she realized she'd never known what a face looked like. Skeptics say maybe it's metaphorical or symbolic, that blind people quote-unquote see in dreams too, just using other senses. But Ring and his team weren't so sure, because these weren't just vague impressions, these were descriptions, accurate, detailed, and consistent with what actually happened. So what do you do with that? How do you explain it away?
Yeah. It's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Then there's the case of Al Sullivan. In 1998, the 56-year-old truck driver was undergoing emergency quadruple bypass surgery after a sudden cardiac complication. And while he was supposed to be completely unconscious, Al later reported what he believed was a near-death experience. He described rising out of his body into a dark, smoky space and then into an amphitheater area where he could look down and see the surgical team operating on him. I think I imagine it like, these theaters that they even have in teaching hospitals, right?
Yeah, like in Grey's Anatomy. They're just watching you from the window up above there.
Yeah. So he's looking down on the table where the team is operating him, and he sees his chest cut open, his heart exposed, and he sees everything what it looked like on that little table. And then came the part that no one could easily explain, because all these things you can explain, like you can imagine what such a surgery might look like.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
But he then said that he saw his surgeon looking slightly confused and then bizarrely flapping his arms like a bird. Sounds ridiculous, right? Until his surgeon, Dr. Takata, later confirmed that yes, before putting on his gloves, he had a very specific habit. He would fold his hands against his chest to avoid contaminating them and then just gesture with his elbows to direct the team, which to anyone watching would absolutely look like a man mid-chicken dance in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And this odd little detail, the elbows, the flapping, this is what caught researchers' attention because it's not something Al could have known or could have imagined. It's this weird true thing that was happening while his eyes were closed, taped close, and his chest was open. And now you might think, well, Al was probably not yet fully under anesthesia and subconsciously witnessing Dr. Takata's little dance. Well, he was already fully unconscious, and as I said, his eyes had been taped shut. And there was a curtain across his chest, so there seems to have been absolutely no way that he could have seen that. How do we explain this?
Yeah, I don't think we can we?
And then there's the story of Dr. Mary Neal. She's not like us, not woo-woo spiritualist. She's not a New Age influencer. She's a Yale-educated orthopedic spine surgeon. A woman whose entire professional life was rooted in science, in data, in physical reality. And in 1999, while kayaking in a remote part of Chile, Mary's kayak flipped and she got pinned under a waterfall. And she was trapped underwater for somewhere between 15 and 30 minutes. It's long.
Yeah.
Long enough to lose consciousness, long enough to stop breathing, and long enough to, medically speaking, die. And Mary later described leaving her body and watching the scene from above as rescuers tried to free her. She said she felt calm, peaceful. And then she wasn't in the river anymore. She was in what she called a heavenly realm. There was music, light, overwhelming love, and what she described as the presence of a spiritual being who guided her along the path lined with flowers. There was no sense of time, no panic, no pain, just warmth, safety, and a very clear message. You can't stay, you have to go back. And she said she protested. I mean, who wouldn't, right? But she was told there was more work for her to do. She would face great challenges, but also deep meaning in her life ahead. That she had children to raise and people to help, and that her time wasn't up, not yet. So eventually she was resuscitated, pulled back into her hurt, broken body, and she was airlifted out, and she survived. And I think what makes Dr. Mary Neal's story so interesting isn't just that she had a near-death experience. It's that she was the last person who would have expected to have one, a literal surgeon. She was trained to think in, blood vessels, bone, science, brain. But after that day, her worldview changed, and she wrote a best-selling book about the experience titled To Heaven and Back. And she's spoken openly about how it transformed her understanding of life and death and everything in between. Don't get me wrong, a medical degree doesn't automatically make her account more valid, but it does make you pause a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, especially if she was a skeptic initially, that's always going to give someone's story a little bit more credibility, I think. So far, we've been floating through tunnels of light, cosmic love, celestial choirs, and people made out of radiant kindness, which is so lovely, reassuring, cozy even. But not everyone who's been to the brink came back singing hymns and craving hugs. Some came back screaming, because for every peaceful vision of heaven, there's someone else who swears they saw hell. These aren't the stories that make it into Hallmark movies. These are the ones people are reluctant to talk about, because what they experienced wasn't love and light. It was fear, pain, and the sense that they had somehow, without warning, ended up in a very bad place. Take this account from a woman who nearly died during a routine surgery. She later said she found herself falling into a cold, dark void, hearing growling voices around her.
Oh, God.
I know. When she called out for help, a voice responded, "You deserve to be here." She described creatures clawing at her, mocking her, dragging her deeper until she willed herself to pray, and that is what pulled her back into her body. Another man, an atheist before his heart attack, said he floated in nothingness for what felt like forever, until he saw the other souls writhing around him, all completely alone but screaming at the same time. Sounds great. He described places without time, without light, and most terrifyingly, without hope. He eventually came back and changed his entire life, becoming deeply religious. And then there's Howard Storm, a former art professor and militant non-believer. In the 1980s, he suffered a sudden health crisis while traveling and had what he initially thought was a type of out-of-body experience. But instead of warmth and peace, he said he was surrounded by shadowy figures that led him down a long gray hallway. The further they went, the more aggressive and mocking they became, eventually turning on him violently. He called out for help, and in his words, a figure made of light appeared and pulled him out. He became a pastor not long after. What's fascinating and unsettling is these hellish experiences often follow the same basic template as the positive ones: separation from the body, an altered state of consciousness, heightened awareness. But instead of comfort and reunion, it's alienation, fear, and torment, sometimes physical, sometimes emotional, always profound. Psychologists like Dr. Bruce Greyson note that people who report these negative near-death experiences often go through just as dramatic a life transformation as those who saw heaven, sometimes more so. Because when you came back from what felt like eternal damnation, you tend to start making different choices. But listen, we're not trying to scare anyone here, and this isn't some fire and brimstone warning either. We are not religious missionaries, and we are definitely not in the business of soul policing. These stories are just part of the landscape. They exist, and they deserve to be acknowledged alongside the peaceful, glowing, harp-filled music ones. What do they mean? That's up to each of us to wrestle with, or not. We're just here to show the full picture as best we can, because whatever this is, it's a lot more complex than just a tunnel and light at the end of it.
What's especially interesting is that these near-death experiences, whether they are the peaceful ones or the terrifying ones, aren't just a Western phenomenon. As we said before, similar stories show up in cultures all over the world. yeah, the specifics change, but the bones of the experience, they're surprisingly consistent. In India, for instance, near-death experiences often involve a miscommunication with celestial officials. People are told it's not yet their time because the wrong person died. So they're sent back with apologies, like basically, oops, sorry, our bad, wrong guy, you weren't supposed to be here yet. It's very Franz Kafka, but in a divine way.
I'd really want to speak to the manager.
In Japan, near-death experiences sometimes include traveling to a bureaucratic way station where the newly dead are judged by supernatural officials before moving on, which I imagine is probably not far off from dealing with actual paperwork in Japan or anywhere. In Native American cultures, NDEs are often interpreted through the lens of the spirit world. Some accounts describe meeting ancestors or spirit animals, and the experience is framed more as a vision quest or a message from beyond than a detour from death.
I was just reading about that, recently. And now I don't say spirit animal anymore because I did not know that it's actually a really, really sacred aspect of some religions. So, yeah, not like I just learned that recently. So I just wanted to, anytime I find something out that I'm like, ooh, I did not know that. I figure I'm not alone in that, right? But it's fascinating how they change differently slightly, isn't it?
Then we have Thai Buddhist culture, and the focus there is on karma. And so people who had near-death experiences reported being shown a ledger of their deeds, kind of a spiritual audit before they are being sent back to correct their path. In Islamic accounts, many people describe a vast garden or a bright presence, sometimes interpreted as Allah, while others recount traveling over a bridge toward paradise or standing before angels who assess their life.
What's that movie from the 80s where they go in front of, is it Defending Your Life?
I don't know that one.
So it is possible that the afterlife, or whatever this is, meets people in a concept, a language that they'll understand. Or are these experiences filtered through culture and expectation, like a dream wearing a local costume? We don't really know, but the overlap is definitely fascinating. So here we are, after tunnels and light, bureaucratic mix-ups, rivers of love, and shadowy hallway demons, we have arrived at the big question. What does it all mean? Science has theories, of course. We talked about them. Oxygen deprivation, DMT releases, brain chemistry in crisis mode, all plausible, all useful. But even the scientists admit these explanations don't fully account for everything. They don't explain veridical perceptions, those I saw my surgeon flap like a chicken moments. They don't explain how people blind from birth describe visual details they shouldn't even have a concept for. And they don't explain why people from completely different cultural and religious backgrounds report experiences that are uncannily similar in structure, even if the wallpaper might be a bit different. We're left with a lot of puzzle pieces and no real way to know if we're even building the right puzzle. What we can say is that near-death experiences are real experiences, not in the objective proof of an afterlife sense, but in the sense that they leave a mark. People come back changed. They remember these events decades later with the kind of clarity that usually is reserved for trauma or awe. And maybe that's the point. Maybe it's not about knowing for sure. Maybe it's all about staying open to the fact that we don't know. Because as much as science and spirituality like to squint at each other suspiciously across the room, near-death experiences live in the weird, wobbly middle. They don't give us an answer, but they remind us how many questions we still have, and how strange, and maybe even hopeful it is that people on the brink of death so often return with one overwhelming message. Love matters. Kindness and goodness matters. And I'd say that's not a bad takeaway for a mystery that we still haven't solved.
I'd say so too. I think NDEs are fascinating. I find them fascinating.
I do too.
one day we're going to find out what it's all about or not. And then we're not even going to know that we don't find out. So
That's it. That's exactly
everything
it.
is fine. This is fine.
It's all
this
fine.
This is truly fine.
Either way,
Yeah.
it's clearly fine. Do you have something good this week?
I do. It's the weirdest thing.
It's so exciting.
Our surprise cherry tree.
Amazing.
So we have a huge little bit wild garden. It has its very wild corners. And there was this kind of scrawny looking tree. And actually, this spring we were discussing cutting it down because it never bloomed. It never did anything. The leaves did look a little bit like a cherry tree, but never bore any fruit. So I'm like, I don't think that's a cherry tree. Yesterday I was mowing the lawn and I see a cherry lying on the ground. And I'm like, what is a cherry doing here? And I look up and my jaw was on the floor. The whole tree was full of cherries.
I love it so much.
And they looked so good. So I tasted them and they were the sweetest, best cherries I ever tried. Obviously also because I'm biased because they are our cherries. And today I spent the day up until noon with picking cherries, and I picked, what did I tell you, like over 7 kilos? That's like 15 pounds.
So much cherry.
Yeah, and then I de-pitted them and I froze a part of them. I gave my mom a part, and then I made cherry marmalade with a part of it.
Amazing.
I'm so excited. They were so amazing.
They look really good.
Surprise cherry tree.
Yeah, all we have is like surprise poison ivy. You're making me really want to... Surprise! It's more poison ivy. Oh.
What's your something good?
I'm just really excited because we have some long-awaited family and friends visiting for the 4th. So I'm just super excited to see people that I do not see nearly often enough. And I can't wait for that. So yeah, super excited. That's it.
You're going to have a great time. I want to see photos.
Yeah, I will definitely share photos. Don't worry. Lots and lots of photos. Right now, I'm just trying to survive this weather. It is so hot. It's gross. It's migraine weather. So yeah.
Also, can I say something else about the cherry tree?
Please.
So like you, and you know it, I'm fearful of heights. Like seriously, I can't even look up or use or I don't know, stand on a chair. But I had to go and pick these cherries up in the tree.
Oh.
And I was so careful and moved so slowly. And I'm so proud of myself for like doing it. And you know what? While I was up there in the tree and slowly picking my cherries, I actually enjoyed picking the cherries. It was really so peaceful and nice to do. Like it didn't feel
nice.
Scary. It didn't feel like work. It was so nice.
Oh, that reminds me that I think I mentioned before I had been watching videos of those little the like fuzzy jumping spiders trying to get better about my arachnophobia. Yeah. And the other day there was one of those fuzzy jumpies guys. And I actually got him myself on a piece of paper and brought him outside to a shrubbery.
That's awesome.
And yeah, I threw the whole paper into the shrubbery, and when Paul got home hours later, he was like, why is there a Kleenex in this bush? And I was like, I was brave.
You have to get yourself a snappy. It's truly the best thing.
Except do.
If you find a really great spider, a big one, then it's not going to fit in. But we're not going to talk about that.
Okay.
I think that's it.
That's it for right now.
If you enjoyed this episode, or at least didn't mind it too much, please consider leaving us a rating and or review wherever you listen. It helps new listeners find us. It tells the algorithm we're not completely useless and unhinged. Also, as always, recommend us to anyone who might be looking for something just like this weird little eclectic collection of murder, mystery, and the macabre throughout history.
That's right. I feel like I've been giving our card to a lot of people lately, so sorry if I randomly handed you a card lately and you felt like it was a foisting. But if you do want more Fresh Hell in your life, join us on Patreon. You'll get bonus episodes, early access, and the occasional chaotic live stream where we pretend to be organized. I feel like you are organized, and I'm just over here like, yeah, I'm on it, Rose.
I'm trying to be organized.
You are. You kill it. You can join our private Facebook group. If you search Fresh Hell Murder, you will find us. Come say hi, share some weird stories, or just lurk silently in the shadows. It's cool either way, you do you.
You can email us anytime at freshhellpodcast@gmail.com or check out our website at freshhellpodcast.com for links to everything, including our P.O. box, if you're still a fan of sending actual mail like it's 1925 and not 2025. We enjoy getting real mail. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, if you've had a baffling near-death experience, please message us. We would be thrilled to hear it, especially for our traditional Halloween episode. So keep that in mind.
Definitely.
Please tell your pets we said hi, hug them, cuddle them, treat them with utter kindness. Be kind to your fellow human being. You have no idea what they experienced and what they've been through. And also be kind to yourself.
That's often the hardest part, we know. And just remember, if you're going through hell,
turn around and just go back.
Just go back. Turn back. It's
go
fine.
Go back. Tschüss.
Bye.